Hi, everyone. I'm Renee Chenault, Fattah, Executive Director of Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity. But in addition to being a lawyer, I was a broadcast journalist for 30 years, and I made a documentary entitled In Our Right Mind, Alzheimer's and Other Dementia's Impact in Communities of Color. And one of the focuses in the documentary was on caregivers, African American men and women caregivers, which is why I am so excited to have this conversation today, a candid conversation about Black women and caregiving. And who better to have the conversation with than Yvette Nicole Brown? Now, Yvette asked me not to do a long introduction, but so much has been written about this phenomenal woman. And I guess one thing that stood out in my mind, one article started off by saying, the question isn't whether you know Yvette Nicole Brown, because of course you do. The question is, where do you know Yvette Nicole Brown from? Because she's everywhere. She's everywhere. She is an actress, a major film and TV star known for her roles in Community and Endgame, as well as the Nickelodeon hit Drake and Josh, which was a favorite of my girls when they were young. In addition to everything that Nicole does in television and in film, she is also a celebrity champion spokesperson for the Alzheimer's Association because her father has Alzheimer's and she's a caregiver for her father. So at this point, Yvette, I couldn't help but just sort of go into a little bit of an introduction on you. I am such a fangirl where you're concerned. You do so much. And this is such, as you said, such an important topic. And I guess because when we think about Alzheimer's and caregiving, we always focus initially on, and rightfully so, the person living with the disease. We don't always focus on the caregiver. So I want to just start off by asking you today, how are you doing?
Listen, I don't ever really know. Like I'm kind of, you get to a point where you kind of move through life. And you just get up and you do what you have to do. I get up in the morning, I have to let my dog out, I have to feed him, then I have to go check on my dad, and then I have to see what the day holds. And you just start ticking things off of your list for the day. And I don't know that I ever even take a moment to kind of check in and go, how am I? Like there's a joke that I do every time someone says, how do you practice self-care? I go, what is that? Because I just don't know. Now, that's not a complaint. That's not me whining. That's just me being honest about where I place priorities in my life, right or wrong. My priorities are my dad and my dog. And I'm making sure that they are okay. I lost my mom this year. And so before she passed away, it's what life is, but thank you for that.
Yeah.
But before she passed, she was number one on the list, then Daddy, then Harley, my dog. But what I've learned on this caregiving journey is that there's nothing wrong with prioritizing other people.
Yeah.
I think it's actually really lovely to have people in your life that you love so much that you're like, even if this is sacrificial today, it ain't sacrificial every day, but even if it's sacrificial today, I'm going to do it because that's how much I love you and want you to be okay. So I don't long answer. I don't know how I am.
Yeah, right. It's moment to moment. Caregiving, I think no matter what is a 24/7 job, but caregiving for someone with Alzheimer's is a whole nother story. Maybe could you just share a little bit for people who maybe don't know what's involved and sort of the responsibilities and what the journey is like?
Yeah, what I always say is I'm the keeper of his memories. And that's the easiest way to think about it, because I'm reminding him of things that he's done in the past. I might be reminding him about what he had for dinner. I remember when I can't think of the name, but when Chadwick Boseman played James Brown, Get On Up. When Get On Up came out, took my dad, so excited because he loved James Brown. So I took him to see the movie, and we were in the car coming home, had just left the movie. I said, how'd you like the movie? He said, we went to a movie. So it's,
and that's when you have to laugh though, right? What I found from caregivers is you've got to have a sense of humor. It's absolutely. Yeah.
And the beautiful thing with my dad is my dad has a really great sense of humor too. So there'll be times where he'll say, "That did I ever tell you?" And I go, "Absolutely. Whatever it is, I promise you told me 50 times." And he laughs as well. So he's aware of his diagnosis. He is every day finding his way through it. And that's why every day is different. Some days I wake up and it's almost like he's himself. He's, 70 or 80% there. And then there's other days I go in, and though he acts as if he knows who I am, I'm pretty sure he doesn't know. So that's the journey. Like that's what it is.
Yeah. What advice do you give to caregivers? I mean, because we hear a lot about self-care, and like you said, what the heck is that?
Yeah.
What do you say to caregivers?
I listen, it's kind of a complete contradiction of what I just said, because I'm a caregiver and I don't have this ability myself, and I doubt that they do either. But you do have to find time for yourself. You do have to find some sort of way to make life a little bit yours as well, right? When you're a caregiver, almost every decision is funneled through, how does this affect the person that I'm taking care of, right? Well, guess who else you're taking care of? You. So you have to make sure that you're making some decisions, maybe not all, but some that actually bring a little light into your life. When I lost my mom, I started doing building Lego. My house is pretty much filled with every single Lego set.
How did you think of Legos? Where did that come from?
I've always loved them, but I also I love puzzles. And what I love about Lego is, as you're building, you have to think, but you don't have to think, right? And you can kind of turn your brain off for a few hours, and when you wake up, you have something. It could be Winnie the Pooh's 100-acre wood. It could be the Sesame Street building, the brownstone. It could be, I'm building the Home Alone house right now for Christmas. That's my Christmas build. It's just a way to turn your brain off for a minute and to have something. And so that is my time. So if I'm in this house with my mom, with my dad and my dog, and my dad is okay and the dog is okay, I'm like, I'm gonna build something. I'm just gonna sit down and so it's that's the way. So every person needs to find what Lego is for them. What is your Lego? Is it binging on Netflix? Is it calling a friend? Is it meeting a friend for a socially distanced coffee conversation, or walk around a lake or a pond in your neighborhood? Find something that nurtures who you are and nurtures your soul in the same way you nurture those loved ones that you're caring for.
Yeah. That is so important, because I think we know the research which says that, oftentimes caregivers, because it is so much, they will end up passing before the person they're caring for, because they're not taking care of themselves and focusing on them. What I've also found, what you just shared, I think is so important, because caregivers have this wealth of information just from being on the journey, know? And I've found that in terms of sharing what works for you, what gives you release, what helps you in caring for the person your loved one with the disease. I would sit in on some of the caregiving sessions and support groups, and the sort of advice and experiences that caregivers had that you wouldn't know about if you hadn't been in the situation. One woman was talking about, the fact that in various stages of the disease, a person with Alzheimer's will start shredding things, or, having to do repetitive things. She's like, look, I'm going through all my, my napkins and my paper towels and whatnot. So she gave her father a stack of towels, and that allowed him to just fold. And you wouldn't know that.
You know it.
Didn't, those sorts of things.
I think I need to do a little more research, but something with paper with people with Alzheimer's is really good. Like, my dad hoards paper towels and napkins, and when I wash his robe or his pockets of his pajamas, there's like paper and toothpicks just in there. And also, I realized today he's now gotten into mail. Like, he likes to grab little pieces of mail. I was in his little nightstand trying to find something, and I found 2 residual checks from July. That's why you holding on to our money. That's our money, man. So you just, but the thing is, we laugh about it, and we just take the journey. This is his journey that I am not overjoyed. I would prefer not to have to walk him through this journey, but I am grateful that I am in my right mind and in a position in my life to be able to walk this path with him, and to make sure that, he's not as afraid.
Mhm.
as he would be if he was going through this alone. As scared as I am with this responsibility and
Mhm.
the concern I have about making sure that he's okay, can you imagine how scared he is?
Yes,
That
exactly.
he's facing this, some mornings he wakes up and he's confused or doesn't know what's going on. Like that's his journey's worse,
Mhm.
in that regard. So, I try to always be mindful of that, and every caregiver should be mindful of that, to continue to see the humanity in the
Mhm.
person they're caring for, because he has dementia and Alzheimer's, but that's something that's happening to him.
Yeah.
It's happening to him, and he
Yeah.
and we need to be cognizant of that. And the times when there's frustration, because there's a phase of Alzheimer's when they get very angry and mean.
Yes.
And my dad is one of the kindest, most genteel gentlemen on the planet. He's always caring and loving and never a cross word. I don't think I've ever heard him cuss. Like that's just not who he is.
Mhm.
And when he
Mhm.
went through that phase,
Yeah.
I was like, what have I done? What did I do to him?
Sure.
And why is he so
Sure.
mad? And then I realized that he's not mad.
Yeah.
It's the disorder, it's the disease that's ravaging his brain, and the brain is just powering, shooting off
Mhm.
in different directions, and the anger is part of one of the things that it's doing. You
Yeah,
know?
yep, yep, yep. I mean, it reminds me of what one of the caregivers I interviewed, who
Mhm.
talked about his dad going just through that sort of thing, the anger and the
Yes.
meanness, for lack of a better word.
Mean,
And he
mean.
would tell himself, "It's not my dad;
My
it's the
daddy.
disease." And
It's the
you
disease.
know, which ties in to something else about, and it ties in with what you were saying about having the responsibility of advocating for our
Mhm.
loved ones. In addition to looking out for yourself as a caregiver, you really do have a responsibility to advocate for that person. And that
Absolutely.
certainly comes into play in the relationships you have with the medical profession. Yvette, I think it's really important that caregivers take the role of advocating for their loved one. And that
Right.
oftentimes doctors are quick to, with this disease, give your loved one medication when that is not what's always indicated. So it's really incumbent, as difficult as it can be, to sort of push back against a doctor, a
Yeah.
professional. It's essential.
I actually have a story about that. My dad was on two medications,
Hmm.
and he was catatonic. Right? Now, I
Yeah.
didn't know enough about how the flow of this disease works to know if he had shifted into a new phase of it, and I
Right.
had to accept that this is who he was now.
Hmm.
But then something happened where he was running out of medication. And so this is during the pandemic. I
Right.
called this doctor and I said, I need to get a new prescription for my father. And she refused to send it unless I brought him into the office. And I was like, we're in a pandemic.
Yeah.
And my dad
Yeah.
is in his 70s and there were no vaccinations at the time. I'm
Right.
like, it's not safe. Can you just send
Just
me
right.
just give me that? Like I felt like with Deborah in the Deborah Winger movie, Terrence Mandieri, I was Shirley MacLaine. Give my
Right.
dad,
Right. Right.
right? So I'm having this moment, and she refused. So it's either I risk my father's health by taking him into a doctor's office in the middle of a pandemic, or I see what happens if he's not on these pills. Do you know that he had stopped taking the pills and came back to life?
Exactly.
Came back to life. My father has now been off of that medication. I'm not advocating this for everyone.
No,
You,
I
you
understand.
please take your doctor's advice. Don't
Sure.
listen to what
Yeah.
I'm saying. But
Yeah.
my dad has been off of those pills now for a year, and my dad is 70% of who he always was
Hmm.
almost every day.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he was over medicated, and I
Hmm.
never would have known that had this snafu not happened.
Right.
So
Right.
you have to, one, know the person that you're caring for, and you have to find a doctor that listens to you. Because the funny thing is, when she started ramping his dosage up before she pulled what she pulled, I was like, well, we kind of going up a little fast. Like he's
Right.
doing good right now. Why are you now adding another
Right.
thing?
Right.
And I realized that for a lot of the people that are not caring for people the way they should, it's a money situation. Because what I learned about her wanting me to bring him in, if he didn't come in, she couldn't charge that fee. And she
Yeah.
couldn't get that money for the and not just my copay, whatever his insurance
Right.
paid for him showing up, she was going to miss out on that. So
Yeah.
that money was more important than my dad's health,
Yeah.
right?
Which is why, yeah, stepping up,
Right.
speaking up. And I mean, as you said, you're not advocating people not listening to
No.
their doctors, but if something doesn't seem right, get a second opinion, go
Right.
to another doctor.
That's
Now,
right.
that's a perfect example. And I heard that from more than one caregiver in
Yeah.
terms of how quickly, people are
You
to,
go up. Yeah,
yeah,
here's a
yeah,
second pill. Here's more. And
yeah.
again, not saying if your doctor says you need it and you have done your research and not the way not the Facebook research.
Right,
Okay.
right, exactly. When you talk to a doctor, right?
Talk to the Alzheimer's Association,
Right,
like
not Dr. Google.
not Dr. Google. And you've realized, and if you know your I know my dad.
Yeah.
Who he became was not my dad.
Who your dad was. Yeah.
I'm like, this is not the next stage of Alzheimer's. This is something where he's just over medicated. And it turned out to be true.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting you talk about the next stage, because that's the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
What I love about this is we're sharing information.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that oftentimes the message that this is the sort of disease that progresses, and what is happening in one stage is not what is going to happen in the next. And I heard so many caregivers express guilt because while they were able to take care of their mom or their dad when they were in the earlier middle stages, they couldn't in the later stages. And that's the horrible thing about this disease. It progresses to the point where, as a caregiver, you can't give the sort of 24/7 care that's required. Could you talk a little bit about the guilt that caregivers feel?
Yeah, like I'm borrowing that guilt from hopefully 20 years from now, if I get to keep my dad that long. My goal is to keep him with me as long as I possibly can. So right now I'm able to care for him myself. If I have to work outside of the home or outside of the state for a while, the city, I have help that will come in and stay in my house and care for him. That's the next phase. The next phase is to have a home large enough where I can have a dedicated room for that person, and they can have their own bathroom and their own bed and their own situation, so that when they come to my house to care for my dad, it's as if they're home in their own space, right? I hope that I can keep that going until Daddy goes on to glory. I don't ever want to put my father in a home. I want him to be with me as forever until Jesus comes and gets him. You know what I mean? But my fear and my guilt is that it might come to a point where I physically can't. And if it comes to a point where his well-being is affected because he's in my house instead of in a facility, then I will make the decision. But it will never be because of convenience for me. He's going to stay with me whether it's convenient or not.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear you. And you are blessed to be in a situation where you can afford to give that sort of care. Not everybody.
Judgment. There you go. That's it. Yeah. Let me say it so they know for me, I mean it. There is no judgment to those of you who cannot do that.
Yeah.
I am in a position where I can go try to find a bigger home and try to renovate it so it can be there. If you are not in that space, do not tie yourself in knots because you can't do that. Your goal is to advocate for the person you love and make sure they have what they need. And if that is a home, the only thing I would say is research the facility. There's been so many stories, and there's a horrible movie. The movie's not horrible. The subject matter is horrible. And I think it's supposed to be on Netflix, talking about about, what happens when someone else takes control of someone's life, and how they liquidate their accounts and they stop caring about the needs of that person. And some of these facilities, not every facility is going to love your loved one the way you do, or care for your loved one the way you do. So if you have to put them in a facility, make sure you research the crap out of that place. And make sure you visit all the time, and not on the same day. Pop in at 3:00 and 5:00 Tuesday or Sunday, so they know, oh, this one has someone that cares about them. We got to make sure we do actually take care of this person.
Yes, which is part of the advocacy that we were talking about in terms of for the person you love. I was actually thinking of another sort of the monetary issue in this. When I did the film, and this is a statistic that, even though it's been a couple of years now since I did this film, it still stands out with me. But I still have to read it because it's staggering, and also because I'm bad with numbers. But but according to research, African Americans provide $43.6 billion annually, and more than 17.4 billion hours in unpaid caregiving for their loved ones. And add on that the estimated direct medical and long-term care cost of Alzheimer's disease, $21.4 billion. So in addition to the physical toll and the emotional toll, there is this financial
Yeah.
burden, responsibility that comes with this disease that, like so many other things in life, disproportionately falls on Black and brown people.
Yeah.
Something that I heard you talk about, which I think is so powerful, is music and the impact of music. First and foremost, just for people with Alzheimer's, you're able to connect whatever goes on in the brain. You're able to connect with music in a way that is really almost magical. And for you and your dad, share a little bit about how there's that music connection.
Yeah, well, my dad, when he was back in the 50s, he was in a doo-wop group, and so he was the bass, and so he's always loved doo-wop. It was his favorite thing when he was a teenager, and that's usually the age, if he gets in his mind and he's lost a little bit, he tends to go back to like 16 to like 25. That was his sweet spot. And so what I do for him is I put on Pandora or Spotify and I play the doo-wop station for him, and wherever he is, he comes back to life and talks about the songs and, oh, I remember this, and oh, that's the moon glows, and that's the heartbeats. And like it immediately comes, like he won't remember again what he had for dinner or what he just had for lunch, but he can tell you the lead singer of the Moon Glows and where he saw him one time, and and then my dad and I have this connection because I started out as a singer. I was signed to Motown when I was a teenager, and so he and I have this shared love of music. And so it's almost like having a master class. Whenever I put music on, he starts to teach me about different a time frame, because I like doo-wop, but doo-wop wasn't my thing, right?
It wasn't your generation.
Right. He has a little late for doo-wop. So he can explain it to me in a way, and we can have a really lovely time together. And he gets to be the leader, because a lot of times, even though I'm his child, as a caregiver, I control everything. I'm deciding what he eats, when he eats, where he goes, what he wears, all of this stuff, what he wears. I let him choose what he wears, but I'm saying there's a lot of things where it's me deciding, well, daddy, it's time to go to sleep, or daddy, it's time to whatever. And when we talk about music, he gets to be in the driver's seat, and he gets to say, well, let's play this next, and I want to hear this, so it's really a lovely way. And from what I hear, music works for every Alzheimer's patient. There's something about where music hits in the brain that it brings them back. So you just figure out what your loved one's favorite genre is and year, and put on Spotify or Pandora and just watch everything change.
No, so powerful. And again, it's a way to connect with your loved one. That's something that can be common ground. I mean, I know we're getting short on time here, but I would like for you to maybe just sort of, if there was some parting words or advice for both caregivers, but then for people who aren't caregivers, because I mean, a caregiver does not have time to advocate and to march on, Capitol Hill or, go to their state capitol. We have a responsibility as individuals supporting caregivers to do that, to make sure that caregiving is supported and valued. But what advice would you have for caregivers?
Well, it's funny, when you were talking, something just crossed my mind. I don't have any kids, right? But I have enough friends who are kids to know that a first-time mother or a mother with a lot of kids, she ain't got no time. She's not, self-care is out the window. And so when someone has a baby or has a lot of kids, their village kind of comes around them and go, you okay, girl? What do you need? What can I do for you? Can I send you? I know that you got 5 of them. They running around. So I think what would be helpful is if you have a friend that's a caregiver, imagine that they're a new mother. And what would you do for them if they were a new mother? What would you offer of yourself if they were a new mother? And that's probably what they would be so grateful to receive as a caregiver, because it's the same emotion of wanting to do well by your loved one and feeling completely inadequate. That's what caregiving is most of the time. So I would say the best thing that those that are not currently on this road can do is to help those in your community and your friend group that are, and then also amplify. If you're on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, if you're on any of those social media platforms, you can always, if you see someone talking about Alzheimer's or caregiving or any of those things, retweet, repost, share it, so that even if you're not marching on Washington yourself, or the person that's doing the caregiving isn't marching on Washington, you can at least let people know that this exists. And then lastly, I would say for the caregivers themselves, to come out of the closet.
Yes.
Talk about the experience. I've found this again with the loss of my mother. There's so many people going through grief that don't
Yeah.
talk about grief.
Yeah.
They don't talk about mourning. And so then when the next person has to go through it, they don't have anybody that they can talk to because they don't know how much it kicks somebody in the
Mm-hmm.
shin,
Mm-hmm.
right? If we're more honest about what the journey is about the good and the bad, not just, I don't mean just sit up and complain about caregiving, but the good and the bad of it, then when it happens, when it comes into someone else's life, they know the people that they can talk to, they know the resources that they can go to, and they also just don't feel so alone. Because isn't that really what it's about? Just not feeling so alone.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. I can't think of a better note to end on. Yvette, thank you so much for
Thank
taking
you.
time to share. There almost are no words to tell you how much we appreciate what you're doing. You're an advocate. You're a wonderful daughter. You're a fabulous actress. I just, I could go on and on.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. Thank you to Black Health Matters for
Yes.
allowing us to have this conversation. If people want more information on the documentary I did on In Our Right Mind, you can go to my website. It's a long name, ReneeChenaultFattah.com. But again, Yvette, you're my heart. Thank you so much for all that you do.
It was a pleasure. And you are a wonderful interviewer. This
Oh,
was delightful.
you make it easy, my sister.
Thank you.
Be safe.